Benny the Butcher's long-awaited album Tana Talk 4 is finally here, and after a few listens, I have some thoughts. Does it live up to the hype? Yeah, I guess. Anyways, let's get right into it. Like I mentioned, I've only listened to it a handful of times, so this is not going to be a full review. This is just a stream of consciousness regarding this album. So the album starts off with the single Johnny P's Caddy, which it features J. Cole. And if you're like me, you may have assumed that the sound that we'd get on this project would be very similar. You would have production that's a bit more soul sample heavy. While that's not really the case, that doesn't really mean that the production's bad. In fact, I mean, you have The Alchemist and Derringer on production throughout the whole thing, so you kind of know what you're going to get in terms of like the Derringer produced tracks. And then The Alchemist, he can kind of do whatever the hell he wants. He's just that guy. But he does kind of go in, like when he works with Griselda and like Boldy James specifically, you kind of know what sound he's going to go for. And that's more or less what we get here. Again, not to say that the production is bad. In fact, the production is probably one of the biggest highlights of this album, because this album is 12 tracks long, which totally reasonable length, but then it has a runtime of about 40 minutes. To me, at first, I thought that was a little bit long, but then I had to remind myself that we are getting accustomed to albums having really short songs, like 2-ish minutes long, and basically making a 12-track album right around 30 minutes. So this, having, tracks at about an average of 3 to 4 minutes, like 3.5 minutes, that's appropriate. In fact, like, that kind of hits the sweet spot for me in terms of most songs. Like, a lot of times you can have a really short song, but nothing really, like, you don't have enough time to digest it. So in this case, you have production that kind of helps carry it along. Like, there are some tracks that, in general, that towards the tail end, you'll just have the beat play out. And that's a good way to kind of wrap up the song. Like, yeah, you can have, or you can be fully engaged with Benny's rapping, or whoever's rapping, but that can only last so long, Like, for me, like, I listen to music in the car a lot. And while I love Griselda and I love like lyrical rap and like coke rap in general, it's not something that's great for the car all the time. You know what I mean? Because when you're driving around, you want to listen to something that has a little bit of bounce to it. At least for me, like, I don't want to just be listening to someone rap and rap and rap and rap just constantly. Like, you got to have some sort of balance, and that's a whole nother discussion. Like, just making songs is not easy. You can be a super dope rapper but make terrible songs, or you can make really great songs and be a terrible rapper. It's very hard to be both. Obviously there's people who can do it, but it's a talent in its own right. But getting off of that weird tangent, this album was pretty solid. Like I mentioned, only listened to it a handful of times, like 2 full times all the way through. But I enjoyed it. Like I did say, I was expecting more soul samples throughout, but Johnny P's Caddy, like, Benny he just sounded so good on that sort of production. So for him to go back to something that's a bit more, I guess, typical, you could say, of Griselda, it just kind of like, oh man, all right, well, that's fine. And typical in the sense that, like, it has essence of Griselda sound, but it's still new. Like, it's definitely not just like the same general shit that we've been listening to for the last few years from Griselda. It actually, like, it does have better and more unique production than the typical stuff. Yeah, the album starts off strong with Johnny P's Caddy. Then we get back 2 times with Stove God Cooks. Great feature. Super Plug is insane. Like, and that's the thing. Like, these are songs that I've listened to a couple times, so I do need to listen to a few more times to really get what's going on. But then we have Weekend in the Perrys, which features Boldy James, and it's just great. I really love Boldy James' feature on this too, because it's just, I think this is an Alchemist produced track, so he just sounds very relaxed, but also that's just kind of how he raps, I guess. Then we have 10 More Commandments, which is a follow-up to the 10 Crack Commandments from Biggie. And, it's actually very interesting timing now I think about it, because the 25th anniversary of Biggie's passing was just a couple days ago, and here's Tana Talk 4 with a song as a follow-up to a Biggie song, which, that's cool. It's great. And I don't know, it's just, it hasn't really been, I was going to say it hasn't been done. I'm sure someone's done it before, but it's just good. I like the way he counts down. It's great. Then Tyson vs. Ali, which, boxing reference. You can apply that to Griselda and who's better, essentially, because it has him and Conway on it, the two artists on Griselda that people tend to kind of say, like, oh, well, now Benny's up above and now Conway's below, or like vice versa. Like, they tend to switch off a lot. So given that you have a track where you have two of the greatest boxers in history, like, against each other, like, yeah. But in the end, you got to remember, it's all love. They're family, literally. And then we have Uncle Bun, which has 38 Special on the feature. And this doesn't happen as often anymore, but I love when rappers basically trade verses. Because, so we're so used to one verse, two verse, feature verse, or the feature somewhere in there. And it's just the full verse. It's not as common anymore to be like, all right, here's a quick 8 bars, here's another quick 8 bars, 8, 8, and then someone fills out the rest. Like, that's what this track is, and I love it for that. I think we did get this a couple times before with Griselda, and I think it was a Conway track, but it's just not common anymore. It's fun to bring it back. Then we have Thoe's Revenge, which has one of the most unique horns, I guess. It's like a trumpet, and like almost triumphantly playing throughout, and it has Benny switching up his flow a little bit. So whenever he goes into a little bit faster flow, I for some reason just pay more attention to him. Maybe it's just because he doesn't do it as often, and when he does do it, he's just rapping. So I don't know. It could also just be that my early days of hip hop were just really into fast rap, so that's an option too. As we get towards the end of the project, we get to the track Guerrero, which features Westside Gunn. Throughout Benny's verse, we have him referring to a bunch of tracks on Tana Talk 4, like 97 Hove and 38 Pesci. Like, it's just a fun time, like when artists refer to their old work, especially when this is meant to be like a follow-up, essentially, or like the next in the series. Then we have Busta Brick Nick, which I just love because it's a almost 4-minute song, and Benny's just rapping all the way through, like just one verse, one take. Like, it's great. And then the album wraps up with Mr. Chow Hall, which is a really good outro because it kind of wraps things up pretty well. Yeah, and with that song wrapping things up, you have him, shouting out Westside Gunn and Conway and their strengths in Griselda. It's a quick song, and just like I said, a good way to wrap things up, especially given like everything that he's done in the like last couple of years since Tana Talk 3, because he mentions like the success that he's been getting. He's been mentioning Griselda, like I mentioned just now, and he talks about getting shot in Houston. So, kind of like a quick roundup of, hey, this is what I've been doing. All right, cool. See you later. And then, honestly, so the album loops back around because if I have it on repeat, because why wouldn't you? But when it looped back around and Johnny P's Caddy came back on, I was like, this would be a good outro too. But honestly, in terms of like what we're getting on this album as an intro, it's much stronger because it really sets the tone for the sort of things that we'd be hearing and the subject matter. But not a bad outro as well. But that's more or less the whole album and my thoughts on it. Right out the gate, my favorite tracks, expectedly, is Johnny P's Caddy, 10 More Commandments, Tyson vs. Ali, and Guerrero. Like, it's just, these are just great songs. And honestly, there's gonna change. This list is not set in stone. I listened to it a couple of times. What do you expect from me? But with all that said, make sure you subscribe, because the review is gonna come next week when I fully sit down and analyze everything with this album. Also, comment below with what your thoughts on this project is and how it stacks up against his other projects. Personally, just off of the first listen, I think it's one of his stronger projects. I do enjoy it more than Burden of Proof, and I'm just considering everything after Tana Talk 3. Like, because if you go back, then yeah, Tana Talk 3 I think might still be a little better, but we'll see. We'll see after a few more listens. But that's all I got. Like and subscribe if you want to see more stuff like this and a review of this album in the future. And please stay safe out there.